After touring around Europe with his band in the late 70s, Barry's illustrious career started in the early 80s with international chart toppers Brotherhood of Man. Then he became a UK top nightclub DJ whilst writing and producing for many famous hit artists. In the 90s, he turned to country music for inspiration and wrote worldwide hit 5, 6, 7, 8, leading to his formation of pop band Steps, who have now had numerous single and album chart success. After more hits with such diverse acts as Sonia, John Otway and the Cheeky Girls, plus a song in the double Oscar-winning film Little Miss Sunshine, Barry moved to the Sunshine Paradise of Thailand, where he's been presenting on radio and TV, as well as continuing to perform music live. His passion has always been songwriting, and this he successfully continues to do.
Then at the start of 1990, you had your first encounter with the famous Simon Cowell, which I believe boosted your already successful life somewhat.
Yes, I was getting ready to take the material that myself and Shane had recorded down to Meedem, the trade fair, which is always in January. And I remember stopping off on the way to Gatwick Airport and had breakfast at Shane's, and there were a couple of Nolans there at breakfast, boobs everywhere. I remember vividly. And when I got to the airport, I bumped into my old manager, Tony Hiller, and he was on his way down to the same festival. So we ended up sitting next to each other on the plane, reminiscing, and it was just like old times. We got on, we were almost like brothers, really, and two peas in a pod. And then when I got down to Cannes in the south of France, bumped into David Van Day, who was looking for a deal for Dollar's Greatest Hits. And Pete Waterman was there. I thanked him for playing Crazy House on the Hitman and Her. And then this is my life now. I was in amongst all of these kind of celebrities and high rollers in the music business. And I was just loving every minute of it. But then it went up a notch, because at Nice airport, in the queue for the return journey, I was chatting with a couple of people, and this guy turned around and said, did I just hear your name's Barry Upton? I went, yes. He says, oh, hi, I'm Simon Cowell from Fanfare Records, and I've got one of your cassettes and there's some really good stuff on it. Could you come in my office on Monday? Now, in my conversations with Tony Hiller on the way down to Cannes, he said, why don't you let me be your manager again? And, I thought, actually, this would be a good idea. So I called him up. I said, do you know Simon Cowell? He goes, oh, I know Simon, yeah. So can you come into the office on Monday then and kind of represent me? He wants to sign a couple of my songs. Sure, my son, he said. Very Jewish. And the first thing he said was, you're involved with that guy Sam Kleiman, right? I said, yes. He said, well, I know him to be a bit of a shyster, so he needs to be out of the picture. So we had to have a meeting first with Sam Kleiman. We met him at a train station, and Tony Hiller just put him right and said, I'm going to get a lawyer's letter, and we know what you've been doing. We know you've been marketing Barry's music but not giving him any money. We want you out of the scene. So he got him running with his tail between his legs, and then we went in for the meeting with Simon, and I came out with an amazing publishing deal, which Simon gave me a big chunk of money, but he said to me, I think you should spend this money on your own studio. You need to have your own recording studio. And he was absolutely right.
Wow, so Simon, in effect, bought you a studio?
Well, yes, in effect he did, because I went and sourced some equipment. I got some amazing equipment, and next minute I've got a 24-track studio in my house. And it just made such a difference to my life, because instead of me having to go up to London or go to Bedford to use studios, now I had my own studio, and I could actually sell myself out as a producer, and do demos for people. Plus, I could record all my own stuff very easily. So Tony Hiller got involved with me again and started writing songs with me, and even he was paying his share for the demos, and then he would bring all kinds of people to my studio as well. In the meantime, Fanfare Records, of which Simon had signed me to, that went into receivership all of a sudden, which meant that one lawyer's letter and I got all my songs back, kept the money, kept the studio. And then Tony suddenly comes up with us producing an FA Cup song for Crystal Palace, who had gone into the FA Cup final. Glad All Over it was. So I produced that, we wrote the B-side, and then Tony was bringing all kinds of famous songwriters to my studio to do demos. In the meantime, Shane Ritchie, my friend, had got a new deal where he was appearing with Derek Jameson on Sky TV. Sky TV was brand new, and this was one of the very first programs on it. It was based on the David Letterman successful show from the US. So Shane eventually ended up getting me involved in that, and I was on this kind of pseudo talent competition, dressed up as Buddy Holly, but singing Bros songs. So as Derek Jameson called me, "Oh, you're Buddy Brolly." You know, Tony Hiller, he labelled me as fearless. He wondered if there was anything I wouldn't do. I mean, the thing was, I didn't care about the so-called credibility factor. I mean, come on, I'm a Pop-Tart. And I always found it hard to say no to anything. So I just did whatever anybody called me up to do. I said I was a yes man. Positivity.
Were you still performing as a DJ?
Ah, yes. And I remember my friend Crazy Kevin. He was performing at a club in Birmingham that was kind of like the Stringfellows of Birmingham, called Liberties. But then he got a contract abroad somewhere, and he needed a replacement. So he phones me up and said to me, "This is a great gig, and I think you'll love it." So I did a couple of nights there, and sure enough, fell in love with it. Had a champagne bar. You got celebrities going in there. George Best would go in there. And I saw Prince in there one night. Yes, the Prince, sitting over in a corner with a big fur coat over his shoulders, a couple of minders. It was that kind of a club. And the girls that were going there were much more high-so, but still very, very accommodating. And so very often I would end up taking one of them back with me after the gig, back down to Newport Pagnell, put them on a train next day back to Birmingham. And I do remember one very debauched evening when there were two ladies who approached me. I'm the DJ, for Christ's sake, I'm the star. And they wanted to take me back to their hotel. They were from Wales, and they were having a weekend away from their husbands. Yes. And so they got me back to the brand new hotel in Birmingham at that time, the Hyatt. Actually, I think that was one of the reasons I wanted to go back with them, was I wanted to see what the Hyatt looked like. Those were the days.
Tell me about your involvement with another music legend, Norman Cook.
Ah, yes. Well, now, there was a guy called Jeff Chegwin who was an artist manager, and he had a client called Lindy Layton, who had been in a spaghetti advert, and he called me up and said, "Have you got any songs? I'd like to demo her. She's just been in the spaghetti advert, and I think she could be a star." Well, I had this song called "Wait for Love," which I thought was quite a good one. So she came up and recorded it, and he obviously tried to market it, and eventually came across Norman Cook. And Norman Cook at that time was just starting a thing called Beats International, and so he didn't use my song initially. He had another song called "Duck Be Good to Me," which he put Lindy Layton on, and I think it went to #1. And then after that, he called me up and said, "That song of yours, Wait for Love, I really like it. Do you mind if I do a version of it?" And I said, "What am I going to say? No?" I said, be my guest. And so he did. He put it out as a Lindy Layton solo single. And then next minute, I suddenly got a lawyer's letter from Billy Cobham in the States. Now, Billy Cobham is a very famous drummer. It's with Weather Report. And I thought, Billy Cobham? Why? How can I get sued by Billy Cobham? And they claimed that we'd used something from a Billy Cobham song. So our lawyers requested that they show us what they're talking about, and sure enough, they sent this song of Billy Cobham's, and it wasn't anything that I'd stolen song-wise, but Norman Cook had sampled a whole section of a Billy Cobham track and made the rhythm, looped it and made the rhythm section. And I called up Norman and said, "What have you done?" And he said, "Well, I know I've used samples, that's what I do." But he thought that Arista Records had cleared it, and they hadn't. Anyway, on all Norman Cook records subsequently, all the clearances were always put nice and clearly on the album cover. Anyway, we settled out of court with the Billy Cobham thing, and we just said that he would get 50% of the writing royalties for any product that embodied his work. So if I used the song in a different way, without hit the sample of Billy Cobham, then it was still my song.
Your favourite production, I believe, was with an unlikely band.
Yeah, it was the summer of 1990. My new studio was up and working. I'd had David Van Day come up and record a couple of tracks. He was my guinea pig. Tony Hill was sending clients galore. And then Pete Langford from the Barron Knights, who I was not unfamiliar with, had an artist called Helen York. And he used to bring her over to the studio, and we recorded a couple of songs. And then he phoned me up one day and said, "Hey Barry, do you know how those Jive Bunny records are made?" And I said, "Well, I've got a pretty good idea, being a DJ and knowing how records are produced." So he said, "Well, would you like to produce our latest single? We want to put together some of our best moments from our live act into a Jive Bunny style record." So I spent a week with the Barron Knights in their studio. They had a studio in Milton Keynes, and I've got to say it's one of the best weeks of my life, because I mean I bought Barron Knights records when I was a kid, and to actually sort of feel like I was part of them, and I really was. I was putting in ideas and crazy ideas, and we put this ridiculously crazy record together, and it was just fantastic. We called it "Wanna Mix Up," and at the end of it, it was like, remember, a 24-hour mix with myself and the engineer, and with lots of splicing and cutting together. No technology, of course. And then I went to bed and woke up next morning, and put my answer phone on, and there was Butch from the Barron Knights, who's a lovely guy, and he just says, "Barry, I've just heard the final mix, and I think it's the funniest thing we've ever done." And I've got to tell you, that was a magic moment in my life. I mean, I still feel shivers going through my body now, because for someone like that to say that was the best thing that they'd recorded when I bought all those records years before was an incredible boost, and just it made me feel fantastic.
So you were having fun being back with your manager Tony?
Yeah, we're doing a lot of writing sessions, mostly at his place in Paddington in London, and we wrote a lot of songs. We were looking to write songs for people who we knew were looking for songs. And one day he said that Diana Ross was looking for material, so I started going ba-dum, dum, 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 ba-dum, ba-dum, and then banging out some chords on the piano. And in 2 hours we wrote this song called "Only Fools," which it just sounded, something about it sounded special. I went back and demoed it at my studio with a friend of mine, a lovely lady, Hilary O'Neill, and little did I know that was going to become a top 10 hit for Sonia. And meanwhile, I was playing tennis, a lot of tennis now. I joined a tennis club, and Mike Stevens, who was living quite close to me, he was now producing David Grant. So I remember us having a tennis match with David Grant. That was fun.
And what about your private life? Any steady girlfriends on the horizon?
Oh, very difficult to have a steady girlfriend when you're on the road. Don't forget, I'm DJing and producing. I'm very busy doing stuff. So the odd girl coming back for one night stands was just fine by me at that time. I did have a few nights with a very lovely Turkish girl I met in Cambridge, who was on an English course, and also there was a young girl who Tony Hiller brought into the studio, and she'd represented Ireland in the Eurovision Song Contest, and he wanted her to record a couple of our songs, and she came over, and we got quite close, and she even came back over from Ireland and spent Christmas with me.
So 1991, a big year for you.
Oh yes, 1991 was an amazing year. It started off with Shane Ritchie, my friend, had just bought a house in Orlando in Florida, and he was in the West End now, and he couldn't really go down there, and he wanted to turn the house into something that he could rent out. It was a show house, and it needed TVs put in it, cutlery, just the general things that would make it a rentable property. So I said, well, give me the keys, I'll go. I've never been to America. So this was my first trip to America in January 1991. And while I was there, I suddenly was switching on the radio in the car and driving around. I just took to it the American way of life like a duck to water. And I loved hearing the country stations. And that was something I'd not really noticed before, because I've been playing dance music and producing pop music, but I'd not really listened to country music. And I didn't really like old-fashioned country music, but I could hear a difference. There were more influences coming in. There was R&B, rock, and stuff that sounded more like the Eagles, for example. And so I went down to a place in the middle of Orlando called Church Street Station, and I remember there was a club there, a country music club, and I used to find myself drawn to it, and the bands that were playing there. Well, actually, they were filming shows for the Nashville Network, so there were some top acts playing there. And while I was there, I met a couple of lovely ladies, Martha Ann and her daughter, Christine, who I took quite a shine to. But Martha Ann is a wonderful lady, full of joy, and they were down there on holiday, I think, or she was on some kind of business holiday, but they lived in Oregon, in northwest of the U.S.A. So I became great friends with them, even bigger friends later that year. I also met a girl from St. Louis called Karen, who was a lawyer, and she was down there on business, but I met her at Universal Studios in one of the queues, and we got on like a house on fire, less said. And she really opened my mind to country music, and I eventually ended up flying back from Florida. It was the start of the Gulf War, so a lot of people were cancelling flights, and it was easy to get a flight anywhere, so I changed my flights, and on the way back to the UK I went via St. Louis, which is where she was from, and she took me right out into redneck country, and to a country music club, and she really opened my eyes as to life in Midwest America outside of the city, opened my mind to Western dancing, and I was really into the music. I just thought it was fabulous, so it got into me.
And then back in the UK there was that top 10 hit with Sonia.
And that was all through Simon Cowell. Funnily enough, he just signed Sonia, and he loved the song, and we wasn't sure really whether it was going to be a hit or not, because Sonia compared to Diana Ross, well, you never know. But sure enough, it went top 10, and it was just played to death on the radio. It just never heard it off the radio. It was a fantastic single, fantastic moment. I somehow got involved with all things American, and there was this American girl who was a late night piano bar player in Mayfair, and I was accompanying her one evening to one of her gigs, and in this late night drinking club, and I remember David Soul coming in, and we had a drink together and reminisced about the tour we did together. And then Simon Cowell walked in and said to me, "Oh, you've got to hear this new mix we have just had done of Only Fools." So I had to go out to his car, his Porsche, sit in his Porsche and listen to the cassette. Yes, cassette players in those days. And he played me this mix, and it had he'd kept all the big long intro that I'd put on at the very beginning, and I wasn't sure whether it'd be right for radio or not, but everybody seemed to love it. Like this big kind of Beach Boys harmonies at the beginning, and sure enough, it did become a top 10 hit. And I remember going to a concert at Ipswich Football Club with Tina Turner, and as I'm driving there, every radio station was playing Only Fools Never Fall in Love. It was such a big hit, massive radio hit, and yeah, top 10.
So your own studio, a top 10 hit. Surely you only needed a steady girlfriend to make your life complete.
Yes, that's very true. But I did try, and I mean, there were so many girls at Liberty's nightclub that I was working at. I was now working there 2 nights a week, and there were so many beautiful girls there. And one of them was this girl called Lorraine. She was a regular there. And I just always thought that she's way too classy for me. She was a model, or she had been a model, and she looked absolutely so glamorous and gorgeous. Anyway, one evening she'd been over to TGI Fridays before she came into the club, and she bought me some chicken wings. And I thought, that's nice. Maybe she likes me. And sure enough, we did. We hit it off, and we got together. And I couldn't believe I got this beautiful blonde girl, and she was probably the classiest girl I'd ever been with. And but we were just so natural together, and we ended up going to California for a trip to the U.S.A. It was a road trip, and we went to Santa Monica. I remember thinking that she actually looks like a movie star. She looks like she should be here in Hollywood. And off we went up Highway 1 to Carmel, up to San Francisco, and there we met Martha and Christine Dedrick, who I'd met in Florida earlier that year in Church Street Station. They came down from Oregon to meet us, and so we got on. We went out together and got on famously. And then I always remember there was one in Union Square in San Francisco, and I said to Lorraine, "Quick, hold the camera a minute. I've got to go up to somebody and ask them something." And I went up and said, "Excuse me, but do you know the way to San Jose?" And they gave me directions. They told me. Magical moment. Anyway, we went back with them with Martha and Christine. We went up to Medford in Oregon and had such a fantastic time in Oregon. I mean, I never thought in a million years of going to somewhere like that. It was real cowboy country, and of course country music was big there, and I just learned so much about the American way of life. Then we returned back down to LA, and Iris, who was used to be with Sam Kleiman, she'd now split up with him because she found out that he was a bit of a crook as well. And then she showed us around and said, showed us the places around Hollywood to go, places not to go, and found a nice hotel by Beverly Hills that we could stay in. It's just a fantastic vacation. And I always remember there was this old lady who was walking towards us while we were walking along the street. Might have even been in Beverly Hills. And she comes and says, "You two make a lovely couple."
Sounds wonderful. So at last you found true love.
Yeah, it seemed like it. Another thing that we did together was that my grandmother, Alma, this is now January 1992, and it was her 90th birthday. And I thought, well, what can we do for her 90th birthday? We've got to do something special. We can't have a party because it was to be too much to get all her family. They're all aging and stuff, and they're all on the south coast. It'd be too difficult to get a party together. So I thought, okay, well, I could make a virtual party by videoing the different relatives and visit them and get them to give a happy birthday message for my grandmother. So that's what we did all over Christmas and New Year. Myself and Lorraine, we travelled around, and the funny thing was, I got Shane, who was now a big celebrity, to be the host of the program. So we kind of like edited this program together, and there was relatives, there were nephews. It was kind of like, this is your life, and now we're going to this place, and now we're going to go over to that place. So yeah, she couldn't believe it. It was kind of like the very first program I ever really produced. She was totally overawed when she saw the final result on her 90th birthday, and she kept saying, "How did you do that?" She was just completely bewildered. Soon after, she passed away, and I was just so happy that we did that for her 90th. I have to say that my grandmother, Alma, she was a big influence on me as regards to being positive in life. When she was that age, she could only really sit in her chair and look at the birds in the garden, and there was one day a week where one of the local churches would send a car and pick up old people and take them there for a kind of social gathering. So I said to her one day, "What do you actually do there?" And she said, "Well, we have a game of bingo, we have a cup of tea, and then I sit and listen to everybody's problems." And so I said, "Where's the fun in that?" And she said, "It reminds me how lucky I am." I just remember thinking that is an amazing attitude to have. And I've only got a few regrets in my life, but one of them is that I didn't interview her on camera. I mean, we had video cameras then. I should have sat down with her and spoke to her about the old days, Victorian days, and her life, how difficult it was to live through 2 world wars. Her childhood, and she had all these amazing expressions, like if I came in and said, "Oh, dinner smells good," if it's been cooking outside, she says, "Yeah, you only need a piece of bread now, don't you?" And expressions like "over Will's mother's," stuff like that. So Alma Lee, she was a true inspiration.
Okay, now I see where your positive attitude comes from. How did it help you move forward?
Well, just after my grandmother died, I felt like I needed to take my mother on holiday. And I remember I was chatting with Shane, who was down at his house in Florida. And he said, "Well, bring her here." And I thought, what, to America? She goes, "Yeah, bring her down here. She'll have a whale of a time." So I did. We managed to get her passport in order. And we flew down to Florida, and on the way we had to stop off at Minneapolis, and I'll never forget, because she couldn't really walk that well, and so I had to wheel her around, and so we were getting special assistance on the journey. And then somebody said, "You've got to change terminals, but don't worry, we'll get you a car. You don't have to worry about getting on the shuttle bus." And next thing, a limo turns up, and it was for us. And I looked at her when we were on board in the limo. I said, "I can't believe this. Your first foot in America, and you're riding in a limousine." And she felt like Lady Monk. So that was a great start to the holiday. And then of course we met Shane down in Florida. He was there just for a few days, and then he was coming back to the UK to audition for the part of Elvis. So I remember I was teaching him a lot of Elvis songs, at his house. And Colleen and Bernie were there from the Nolans. Yeah, we had a wonderful time. And while I was there, I visited a couple of country music radio stations, just to get the flavour of what they were doing, and maybe get some samples of the music. And that they were very good, and they really did look after me with that.
So were you now a fully fledged country boy?
Not quite, not just yet, but I was getting there. I decided to actually start up a duo, and I wanted to play some of these great country songs that I was hearing on my travels. So I put together a duo called Stars and Stripes with a lady that I'd met before who'd been recording at my studio with Pete Langford, Helen York. And I phoned her up and said, do you fancy doing some of this? You've got a good voice, and I think it would really suit country. And she went for it. And so we put together a set, and we started doing a few gigs. The problem was at this particular time, I was not getting on so well with Lorraine. She wanted to become a model again, and she was losing weight, and she became so skinny. It got in the way of our relationship. And also another girl came on the scene at that time called Mary. Now Mary, I met her again at Liberty's. She was a kind of dark-haired, buxom lady who looked a little bit like Ronnie Spector from the Ronettes. She had that kind of hairstyle. It really did take my eye. Anyway, she was a very educated lady. She loved classical music, and she's very sexy. So I kind of parted with Lorraine and got together with Mary. And then she took me to some classical concerts, including a concert with Nigel Kennedy at Ronnie Scott's in Birmingham, and he was playing Jimi Hendrix material. This was great. I loved it when new music was being or my eyes were being opened to new music and or new styles of music. It was great. So myself and Helen, we weren't together as a couple, but we were together as a country music duo, and we started playing at a local wine bar not far from where I lived, in a place called Olney. It's a lovely village, Olney Wine Bar. So we used to play there regularly, and Clem Curtis, who's if anybody remembers Clem Curtis from the Foundations, who sang "Why Do You Build Me Up, Buttercup?" Great guy, and he used to come up and sing with us, and we had some amazing nights there. Really nice to remember. And then I got a call from Brian Poole, you might remember from Brian Poole and the Tremolos from the early 60s. He was a friend of Clem's, and his daughters, Karen and Shell, they were looking to do some recording, and I said, oh, well, bring them over and we'll have a listen. And sure enough, they'd got potential. So I kind of got them to sing on a few demos of mine, and I recorded a couple of their song ideas. Anyway, they became Alicia's Attic. If anybody remembers a pop band from the 90s called Alicia's Attic, two girls, that was them, Karen and Shell. I taught them everything they know. But there was one very funny incident when they said, oh, it's our father's 50th birthday and we wanted to do a surprise party. So the idea was that I would get Brian to come over to my studio and talk to him about what the girls were doing, and they would set up this surprise party for him at his house, which wasn't too far from mine. And so he came over, and I kept him talking, and there wasn't really much that was wrong with what the girls were doing, so I had to keep stringing it out. And then he's looking at me a little bit strange, and eventually I got the phone call to say, oh yeah, the coast is clear. So I said, okay, well, cheers Brian, thanks very much. And off he went to his surprise party, which I followed him over. And he thought it a bit strange when he saw me getting out of my car when he arrived he arrived at the same time at his house. But anyway, that was my part in Brian Poole's 50th birthday party. And then Hazel Dean became a friend of mine. She had a lot of hits with PWL, with Pete Waterman, and she was looking for songwriting partners, and Tony, my manager, sent her up, and we became great friends, really great friends. Also Barry Blue came up and we wrote a couple of songs together. And one of the songs that we wrote, he said, oh, I've got a vocalist to come in and sing it for us. And that was Les McEwen from the Bay City Rollers. So all these stars were coming one by one to my studio. Life was great. Life was good. My love life was hunky-dory. Things were fabulous.
Your nightclub DJ career ended in 1993. How did that happen?
Well, about that time, rave music was taking a hold of nightclubs, and the managers, they were trying to get you just to mix records together, not be the personality DJ that you'd been for the past umpteenth years. And I didn't really. Also, they wanted to reduce your money because you're not really doing so much. So they didn't need a personality DJ. Just need someone who could mix records together. And rave records or house techno records were so easy to mix together. I mean, nowadays it's even easier. Just press one button and it syncs them together. Now, in those days, we did actually literally have to put vinyl records and get them in sync with each other. But I just lost interest, and I didn't find it so creative to be a DJ anymore. So it was actually, I remember my 39th birthday, Mary bought me a cake, and I was a little bit embarrassed about being 39, and I thought, I'm too old to be a DJ now, right now. So I gave it in, and I did a 180-degree turn and went full on into country music.
So you were preferring American country music now?
I loved playing new country live. I just loved the fact that there was great melodies. It was rocky. There was some fantastic songs for girls, which Helen was singing. And so we put an album together. I actually started writing some songs in that vein, and I recorded the Stars and Stripes album, which only ever came out on cassette, but included some really good songs, including probably one of the best songs I think I've ever written, called Hey You on the Radio. And it was just so nice to be in amongst tuneful music and not boom chip boom chip boom chip boom chip boom chip all the time. So there we go, that was a little change in my musical direction.
And then you met Debbie.
Yes, Debbie. She was someone who lived locally to me in Newport Pagnell, and she came to one of the gigs that I was doing with Helen as a duo, Stars and Stripes, and lo and behold, she loved country music. She loved the style, all the clothes, and the feel of the music and stuff, and she made a beeline for me. I remember coming to quite a few of the gigs and turning up in looking absolutely wonderful with a cowboy hat on and fringy clothes and stuff. So what can I do? I'm a Pop-Tart. I went for her. And the great thing about Debbie was that she lived locally, so geographically suitable. But the only downside was that she had two kids. A boy and a girl. The boy was about 8 years old, and the girl was about 13 or 14. And the biggest problem, I went with it. I kind of went with it, but the biggest problem was her and her daughter having big arguments, and me having to be in the middle of it. The son not wanting to go to school, so me having to drag him out of bed to take him to school. It wasn't me, really. But however, we did go to the U.S.A. She loved the U.S.A. She had friends in the U.S.A. So we went to L.A. We did a tour of L.A., San Diego, Las Vegas, Palm Springs. We stayed with a family over there. They were friends of Debbie's. And we got on pretty well. I did actually feel like I had a family all of a sudden. And it didn't feel too bad, I have to say. Despite the arguments, it was okay.
What about your celebrity tennis event?
Ah, yes. My local tennis club at that time, which I was becoming a real avid tennis player and playing regularly. Good way of keeping fit. I've always loved tennis. And they needed to raise some money for something to do with the club. And I just came up with the idea of saying, well, let's organise a celebrity tennis event. I know lots of people, I could get them there. And sure enough, I managed to get Hazel Dean, a few of the Nolans, Shane Ritchie, Clem Curtis, even Ross King came. And I remember having a game of tennis with him. He's a keen tennis player. So it was a total success. Helen, who was my partner in Stars and Stripes, she had a summer season that she was about to do with Brian Connolly. So I was left on my own to do the gigs. However, she did have a friend called Sue, a lovely looking girl, and she took over from Helen and did a great job. And at the end of the summer, I didn't want to see her go. So I came up with the idea of, why don't we do it as a threesome? Have both girls in the band and call it Wild at Heart. And make it a little bit more pop party band. So we did a big launch party in London, of which Hazel Dean came, Shane came. He was appearing in Greece at the time, in the West End, so he just came across the road. Clem came, David Van Day came. I invited a lot of agents, they were really impressed with us. So we ended up getting loads of work, and it was great. Myself, Sue and Helen, we were now Wild at Heart.
So you were back with a vengeance as a pop tart with a pop band.
Oh yes, we were gigging all over the place, and it was very successful. And then one day at the Only Wine Bar, the manager Alan had a nephew called Steve who owned a wine bar in Southampton. So we were invited to go down and play there, and that was my first introduction really into the community of Southampton. At the time, Debbie's kids were getting a little bit raucous, shall we say, and the writing was on the wall. I wasn't going to be hanging around too much longer. Enter New Yorker Lisa Smith, who was working for BBC South. She did a lot of the graphics for the weather maps and stuff like that, and various news items. And I got suddenly friendly with her, over friendly, shall we say, and so I started making a lot of trips to Southampton, leading a kind of double life with Debbie in Milton Keynes and Lisa in Southampton. I'm a Pop-Tart, right?
And suddenly it's your 40th birthday.
Yes, and it was Hazel Dean's idea that I should have a big birthday party. I wasn't sure, but she says, you'll regret it if you don't. She was 1 year older than me, and she'd already had her party. So I decided the Only Wine Bar was the best place for us to hold the party, and it was just unbelievable. I had Glenn and Dave there from my very first band. Helen and Sue were there. Clem Curtis and Brian Paul, and my mother and my sister and my nephews, and it was just a fabulous party. It really was an amazing night. I don't remember too much about it, and I do have a video of it which I'm a little bit dubious as whether to watch back or not. But I'm sure it looks fantastic with all the talent that was on show that evening.
Sounds like an amazing celebration, but am I right in thinking at this time you had 2 relationships on the go?
Well, yes. It was a bit tricky, but thank God in those days we never had any internet and we never had smartphones. And I was able to do it. I was able to have these 2 relationships, one in Milton Keynes and one in Southampton. And then Debbie suggested we go to Nashville. She wanted to take me there as a 40th birthday present. How could I say no? I'm a Pop-Tart. And so Tony Hiller, my manager, he knew Nashville very, very well. And he had a contact there called Ralph Murphy, who was one of the heads of ASCAP in that city. And Ralph Murphy used to work for Tony Hiller at Mills Music. So he was in London and Tony Hiller introduced me to him. So it meant that when we went to Nashville, we kind of like had a good contact there to start off with. And he got us free passes to a thing that was happening while we were there, the country radio seminar at the Opryland Hotel. And I met just about every country star there. There was Emmylou Harris, Trisha Yearwood, Pam Tillis, even Shania Twain. I had a nice, lovely chat with Shania Twain. This is just before she was about to become world famous. Billy Ray Cyrus was there, Brooks and Dunn, and I kind of got the vibe of the line dancing thing that was going on around country music at that time as well. I also met one of my favourite guitarists in the world ever, Albert Lee. I had met him once before, remember, at the Everly Brothers reunion rehearsal. But this time, Ralph said, "Oh, did you know that Albert's in town? You might want to hook up with him. He's staying at the Hampton." And so I called him up. Sure enough, he says, "Yeah, well, I'm doing a session this afternoon. Come over, we'll have a glass of wine." And that was amazing because I met him at the end of the session that he was doing, helped him carry his guitars back to the hotel. He showed me this new prototype of a Music Man guitar that's going to have an Albert Lee signature on it. So I was very privileged there. And then we went for a glass of wine. Fantastic. What a great guy. And then another contact that Ralph gave me was a lady called Joan Cook, who she used to be married to a guy called Roger Cook, who was part of the songwriting team Cook Greenaway, and they had a lot of hits in the 60s. Anyway, Roger Cook went to Nashville, took Joan with him, but they kind of divorced. And Joan was working as Garth Brooks' secretary. At that time, Garth Brooks was the biggest selling act in the world, bar none. Anyway, he said, "Yeah, go over and see Joan. She'll make you a cup of tea and hook you up with a couple of people, that maybe you might want to meet." And so we did. And the first thing she did was invite us to a Garth Brooks warm-up concert. And that was just amazing. I didn't actually meet Garth Brooks that time, but I did later on. And from that country music seminar, I ended up with hundreds of promo CDs. I had to buy another suitcase to take everything back to the UK. But myself and Debbie, we weren't getting on quite so well. There was some moments where she wasn't quite so cool amongst music people. And so I thought maybe it's time we called that one a day. Meanwhile, in Southampton, Lisa, who I was getting on famously with, she was taking me to these parties with her high-so friends. She had a lot of friends in high places. And she was very artistic as well. So she taught me a couple of programs on her Apple computer. It's all new stuff. This is all new technology to me. But I was ready to learn. And then I did a lot of gigs with Hazel Dean. We were traveling around all over the country doing mostly gay clubs. And I was doing the sound for her. She trusted me on the sound. And we went to places like Dublin. I remember once we went to Dublin with Sunita, and she's a lovely lady. And artists were coming, or writers, songwriters, famous songwriters were coming to my studio, like Ronnie Scott, who wrote It's a Heartache and Lost in France, those Bonnie Tyler hits. And then there was a guy that Tony Hiller sent up to me called Les Reed, and I vaguely heard of the Les Reed Orchestra, but I didn't know much more about him. But anyway, we got down to work and we started doing the demo, and then stopped for a cup of tea, and I just said to him, "Can you just remind me some of the hits you had?" And he said, "Well, there was It's Not Unusual, and Delilah for Tom Jones, The Last Waltz for Engelbert Humperdinck." And then the one that I was really impressed with was one of my favourite songs from the 60s. There's a kind of hush all over the world. So, that was written by Les Reed. So the guy was a complete legend. He's in my studio. I wasn't making a great deal of money at that time, but it was okay. I was getting by.
Ah, but more chart success was around the corner, I believe.
Yes, and with the most unlikely of artists, U.S.A Football Club. I was on my way to a Wild at Heart gig one Saturday night, and Tony Hiller phones me up and says, we've got to do a song for U.S.A Football Club by Monday. We're going to have it finished by Monday. We've got to write it and record it by Monday. Okay, because they got into the cup final. So we needed a cup final song for them. So yeah, sure. Tony came up to my studio the following day on a Sunday, and we knocked something together, an A and a B side. We went down to a studio in London where the U.S.A Football Club players all came after their training, and I somehow managed to get them to sing the words in the right places. Of course, there's a little bit of an art to doing football records where I laid with the help of a couple of session guys, we laid our voices down first. We told them it was a kind of guide, but when you mix it, you put your voice in the middle and theirs around the outside. So all of a sudden, it all comes in tune. Anyway, it was a hit, 2 weeks in the charts with U.S.A Football Club. And then I started doing Dollar's Greatest Hits album, which the problem was that David Van Day couldn't really get all these different record companies that he'd had hits with Dollar to agree on a Greatest Hits album, coming together for a Greatest Hits album. So it meant that all the songs had to be re-recorded, and he'd found some finance from a guy, I think, from Nottingham, and he got me to start re-recording them.
Okay, so now it's 1995 and suddenly you're in big demand.
Yeah, there was a couple of very memorable tours in 1995. First of all, with my band Wild at Heart, we were asked by CSE, which is Combined Services Entertainment, to go to Bosnia, tour Bosnia. It was kind of like the tail end of the war, but it was still going on. And this was with Jim Davidson. So there would be my band and Jim Davidson. Oh, plus we had an SAS guy to protect us, so looking out for things that other guys in the services may not have spotted. It was a priceless experience, and we arrived in Split with Jim Davidson and got into a Sea King helicopter, and he didn't look so keen on it. And I said, I thought you liked all this military stuff. And he said, don't like this bit. And I realised why. When we were up in the air, we were a sitting target for snipers, and we did have a rear gunner at the back there. Anyway, we did the shows. They were fantastic shows, and we became we were made honorary desert rats, because it was the Royal Anglians Regiment that were serving out there at the time. And very honoured, and great fun to do that tour with Jim. I had to add an extra dancer, so it was myself and 3 girls, not just 2 girls. And the extra dancer, she was a bit of a problem, and it caused a bit of bit of trouble. And it ended up with Sue and Helen quitting the band, so I had to go and audition some new girls for Wild at Heart. And then back in the UK, I was doing a lot of gigs at that Olney Wine Bar. That place was such a den of iniquity. There really was. We're being targeted all the time. I was being targeted by many different types of women, and one of them was a pilot's wife. And while he was away doing his work, she would lure me over to her house and have a wicked way with me. I mean, it was very difficult not to be a rampant Pop-Tart.
Now, in the summer of 95, you were having a few money issues and your bank was getting fed up with the overdraft.
Yeah, I was kind of getting a little bit tired of Milton Keynes and that kind of area. And I did love the South Coast. I loved Southampton, and the fact that you could get to Bournemouth easy, you could get to Brighton easily. So the bank really was my final motivation to sell up and just move. So I moved down to the south coast to a lovely village called Romsey and started a whole new chapter in my life. And in hindsight, it was actually a great move. However, as I was setting my studio up in Romsey, in my new house, there was a bit of a problem because I'd written this theme song for a primetime show on TV called The Shane Ritchie Experience, starring Shane. And the producer, Kenton Allen, suddenly said, "Oh, but I need a click track on the song." So all of a sudden I had to quickly set the studio up at really fast pace and get that mix with the click track on one side, and then dive up to, I remember I met him at Marble Arch, right next to Marble Arch, handed over the DAT tape, the digital audio tape, and job done. And that was a real success because the song was used as the theme tune in and out of all the different sections of the show. A good earner. And then out of the blue, there was this very bizarre phone call from the Musicians Union in London, and they said, your name's been put forward to put together a band to support Deputy Labour leader John Prescott, who's going to be taking this tour around theatres called the Rolling Rose Tour, and it's sponsored by the Daily Mirror. And now I wasn't a Labour Party supporter, I wasn't a Daily Mirror supporter as such, but this Pop-Tart completely sold his soul, and I did it.
Oh dear. So now, here you are, out of the blue, the musical director for Her Majesty's opposition party. So how did that go?
More fun than you could imagine. At the press reception, which was held in London, not far from Parliament, Tony Blair was there, Glenda Jackson, Richard Wilson, TV personality, and the world's media. And we had to play a couple of songs, Moving On Up. I remember we did that one. And they were all there, Her Majesty's opposition, all on the stage with us. And Tony Blair was next to me, and these photographers, they were saying to me, give Tony a guitar, because they knew that he, once upon a time, he was in a band. And I was just about to do it, and I could see the executives from the party going, no, don't do that. There were some hairy moments on the tour, but it really was great fun. We did Cardiff, Aberdeen, Birmingham, Leeds, and on every show there was a member of the opposition cabinet plus a TV celebrity. So there'd be people like Mo Molan, Robin Cook, Gordon Brown, David Blunkett, Margaret Beckett, and then there would be celebrities like Richard Wilson, John Peel, he was on a couple of them. And the funny thing was that I had to play them on, or my band had to play them on, but I had to organise it with something suitable, some suitable music. So like Margaret Beckett, who was Shadow Health Secretary, spoonful of sugar, as they walked down the steps in the middle of the stage. I remember some very, very good conversations I had with the Labour Party office, and they came up with some terrible suggestions for David Blunkett, which I rejected. Robin Cook. Robin Cook was the one which I thought we were going to get sacked off of the tour for, because I wasn't a great Robin Cook fan. And I thought, when I'd seen him on television, I thought, I think he's got a lot of sense of humour. Whereas John Prescott was great. He had a real sense of humour. And I saw him off guard sometimes backstage, and it was almost like Les Dawson. I won't say my wife's ugly, and he'd be talking like that. But he was a lovely guy. And one day I turned up, did the sound check, and the TV celebrity, was going to be an actor from London's Burning, a TV series called London's Burning. So I went up to him and said, "Oh, we're going to play you on with Fire, da da da." And he went, "Oh yeah, great." I said, "Then when you get to the microphone, when you walk on, if you get to the microphone, you can join in with us if you like, you know." And he laughed at that. So I went backstage, and there's Robin Cook. I couldn't resist it. I just said, "Robin, we're going to play you on with a nice piece of music." He was Foreign Secretary, I think, was it Shadow Foreign Secretary. So I said, "We're going to play you on with Trains and Boats and Planes, and if you get to the microphone before we finished, just join in with us." And he went, No, I don't do that. No, I'm not singing. I'm not doing anything." So I thought, just as I thought, no sense of humour. So I went backstage and with the rest of the band, I said, "Let's change what we were going to play." So I'll never forget this as long as I live. It was one of the funniest moments. He appears at the top of the stairs and walks down the stairs to diddly diddly dee, diddly diddly dee, Rockin' Robin. we did Rockin' Robin. It went right over his head, but all the Labour Party organisers at the sides of the stage, they were on the floor laughing. And I did think, when we started to play, I thought, "Oh, this could be us now, the end of us on this tour." But no, they found it so funny. And so we did the rest of the tour, which ended up at Brighton Racecourse, just before the Labour Party conference, which was going to be at Brighton. And a very bizarre moment where I was in the kind of the green room area with a buffet and some drinks and stuff, discussing odds on horses with Tony and Cherie Blair.
Wow, what an experience. So did you immerse yourself into the Southampton scene?
Well, yes, and Hayden Maggs, who was the brother of Hull Maggs, who I worked with in the late 70s in Newport in South Wales, he was living in the area, and he was with a girl called Erica, who had just had a record out on PWL. And in conversations with him, I realised I could actually manufacture my own CD and put it out. And I thought, this might be a good idea. All these songs that I've got laying around, and some of my country songs and stuff, I could make a Barry Upton CD and send it out as a kind of showcase. I got this girl that I'd met, this one of these high-so girls from Southampton called Barbara, who was an excellent singer, and she did a few gigs with me actually, but she came and sung on the album. And also Erica came and sung a few sessions for me as well. It was about this time that at Simon's Wine Bar, which I used to play at in Southampton, a guy called Kevin walked in one night. He was drunk. It turned out he had a boat. He'd been working on his boat all day. Came in very drunk, wearing dirty old clothes. And he came up to me at the end of the gig and said, "You're effing good, you are. I want to book you for my work's annual Christmas party." I went, "Oh yeah, okay, well here's a card, you know." Anyway, he did. He booked me for his Christmas party, and that was the start of an amazing friendship. A friendship which is still with me to this day, and part of the reason that I'm now living in Thailand.
Ah, so you really were making friends there.
Yes, although Lisa, who I was really getting on, I thought, great with, but she was getting a bit fed up with my frugalness. She was mixing with all these high-so people, you know, who were very wealthy, and I wasn't so wealthy at that time. I had to be careful with my money a little bit. She didn't like that, so she went. Anyway, I went straight into another relationship with a girl called Angela, who I met, very sexy girl, and a very wild Christmas with her. And I had some fun on Kevin's boat. We were now great friends, and I met a girl called Tina, who was involved with property, and another blonde bombshell. So yeah, there's some lovely people down there in Southampton, and I was doing okay. I continued doing recording Dollar's greatest hits. More money was coming in, and I think I completed the album there as well. I've got different session singers in to sing Teresa Bazaar's parts because she wasn't available. David Van Day, not the easiest person to record, but I did it. And the resulting album sounds pretty much like the original tracks. So I was quite proud of that. Then I released my CD, which was called Wild at Heart, and there was a lot of country songs on there. And there was a new radio station called Country 1035, and I sent the CD to them, and they said, "Oh, send us a few CDs, and we'll do a competition, and we'll have a Barry Upton weekend." So, of course, I supplied them with a few copies. And I remember I was driving around the M25 to go to a gig and listening to Country 1035, and I remember them playing Eric Clapton, a country-ish Eric Clapton song, and then one of my tracks, and they sounded so similar. I thought, hey, I'm producing some good material here. You know, that sounds good.
Confessions of a Pop-Tart.